and welcome to the Majara webinar series by HBR Arabia and MIT Technology Review Arabia and sponsored by OmniClouds. My name is Sylvie Nicholas, your moderator and executive board member of HBR Arabia, and I'm pleased to be your host with such an interesting panel. As with many conversations in the last year, today we're going to discuss aspects of the new normal. What does a post-COVID world look like, and how has it impacted different organizations and industries? Following the challenges that originated and expanded during 2020, both companies and government organizations are now anticipating increased collaboration with each other to expedite socioeconomic recovery processes across the globe. But to succeed in this market, enterprises don't need to only view technology as a way to automate processes, but instead use it to open up new ways of doing business. So today we're going to discuss using technologies to scale business to the next level while protecting from market risks. Ways that organizations have engaged with technology, not only to survive crises, but to find strategic advantages and thrive. We strongly hope that our discussion today will help shed some light on the need to better leverage the role of technology tools and approaches to reinvent business models and evoke innovation to foster the growth of the newly emerging social and business value ecosystem sustainably. We have a robust panel today, including wonderful speakers from government and industry, and I'll take the opportunity to introduce them now. Starting with His Excellency, Dr. Ahmed Daher, Deputy Minister for Information Technology with the Ministry of Education in Egypt. Mr. Daher, His Excellency has over 15 years with Siemens in Egypt as a senior business consultant, SaaS, ASP, and government projects, and e-learning mega projects in the Middle East. He earned a master's in computer engineering and PhD studies at MTC. He joined the Arab Academy for Science, Technology, and Marine Transport in 2012 in the President's Office, responsible for strategies and projects. He was then the CEO for the Academy Company for ICT. Dr. Ahmed has worked with Intel, IBM, Microsoft, Fujitsu, and Oracle on special projects, especially in e-government projects in Egypt. He is specialized in business development, along with a deep technical knowledge and expertise in cloud computing, e-learning and education technologies, research and innovation management, and is a member of the Open Data Center Alliance. Next, we have Mr. Ahmed Refki, the CEO of Raya CX. Mr. Refki is a senior executive providing strategy, vision, and leading enterprise transformation. He holds a BS degree in computer and automatic control with continuing education in several institutes, including IMD in Switzerland. Mr. Refki was the managing partner and co-founder of many companies in the United States, such as Planovate and Nutri Selections, serving as the senior vice president and co-founder of Exceed, a global BPO service provider, before joining Convergence as Egypt's country manager. He is mostly known for his revenue and profitability growth abilities, as well as his versatility in launching and transforming businesses in different industries. Next, we have Mr. Bohar Ba, Chief Executive Officer of Samina Telecommunications Council, a noted management and technology consultant, and in his role as CEO of Samina Telecommunications Council, he's responsible for research efforts and intellectual property of all telecom institutions in the South Asia, Middle East, and North Africa region. Mr. Bohar also serves as a director and board member for several companies in technology and management and consultancy services, and is driving the awareness of the value of technologies across the region. He has 22 years of experience in business development, international marketing, and consultancy services, and has held several major management positions in corporations in Paris. He's also worked closely with several government and investment banks to promote trade, investment, and cooperation between developed and developing countries in the Middle East and Europe, and is actively involved in the privatization process of MIA and the investment projects, aiming to link governmental opportunities through the region. Mr. Hatem Salah is Sohob CEO. As the CEO, Mr. Hatem is focusing on harvesting the digital transformation benefits for every possible individual. User experiences are getting reformed in spaces like education, learning, working, entertainment, shopping, etc. Sohob is bringing this huge transformation with its readiness of individuals to enjoy its benefits. Before Sohab, Mr. Hatem used to be partner of Chief Growth Officer in Elementor.net, where he drove the growth strategy for this online platform that has more than 2.2 million visitors and 3 million visits during its initial year in 2018. Before Elementor, Mr. Hatem had many executive positions like Chief Technology and Transformation Officer for GEMS Education, the largest K-12 school chain globally, as well as CEO for IT Works Education, where the company reached 6 million learners on its platform. And finally, last but not least, we have Mr. Amar Eid. Amar is the CEO and board member for OmniClouds, leading the first native cloud digital service provider, OmniClouds. Mr. Amar brings over 28 years of experience in the technology and telecommunications industry, having worked at leadership positions for numerous global multinational organizations. He's an advocate for the creation of industry synergies and collaboration across the whole ecosystem through leading and participating in industry forums that help reshape the region's cloud and telecommunications landscape by pushing the envelope of innovation. Mr. Eid strongly believes in a shared economy, cloudification of services, and the need to venture into artificial intelligence, machine learning, and shared service platforms, which he is driving at OmniClouds to be at the helm. Welcome, gentlemen. You're an incredibly accomplished bunch, and it's my honor to have you all here today. Now, if I may, let's start with some opening remarks. I'd like to set the stage for the discussion around the ideas of leveraging the role of technology tools and approaches to reinvent business models and evoke innovation to foster the growth of newly emerging social and business value ecosystems. I will start, honestly, with the man who on the upper left-hand corner of my screen, Mr. Ba. Mr. Bakar Ba, if you could start with some opening comments, sir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And it's my great pleasure to be here today. And I'm very excited to share my perspective on the need to better leverage the role of technology and some approaches. Let me start by saying that no one can deny that it has become evident through the COVID-19 pandemic, availability of resilient and sustainable broadband infrastructure and access to connectivity and locally relevant digital services are key going forward. But it's not always easy to ensure that all technologies that are available find their right avenues, find the right nurture and environment, including fostering essential partnership and collaboration to address shortfalls and bring value to everyone. One key aspect of Samina Telecommunication Council's work is centered on the question of how to leverage ICT and telecommunication networks to advance human-centric digital economies that are sustainable and leave no one behind and benefit all stakeholders. And already before the crisis, government as well as the industry have been quick to recognize the opportunity that digital development using different technologies and applications represent. And for government, digital services can help address local demand-side internet adoption barriers, such as capacity, relevance, and affordability, and can be an efficient conduit to contribute to achieving national transformation plans by tackling some of the most pressing urban and rural challenges. And my last point, those technologies can help accelerate the achievement of our 2030 United Nations agenda. And for that, I'm referring to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. But I am sure that we will elaborate much more during our conversation today. And thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Refke, if I could come to you.
Yeah, good morning. Let me go back in history and share some historical background on how customer service evolved during the past years. Originally, when it started as call centers And the only interactions with clients at that point of time was either physical interaction or through voice calls. Then gradually we started adding some channels like, chat, email, support, and we called it contact centers. And then customers tend to expect more out of companies and brands throughout their journey, pre-purchase, post-purchase, and repurchase. This is when the industry developed further to cover the customer journey. So the whole touch points with the customer, every touch point matters. And we started to look at it as the whole customer experience during the journey, and including digital interactions. That's where technology plays a very important role, especially when it comes to analytics and artificial intelligence platforms. Now, it's very interesting what happened during the pandemic, because all of a sudden everything went virtual and online, and business and consumer behaviors changed. And what's more interesting, that it worked well. It really worked well during the pandemic, and it will continue to work that way. I mean, it will continue people to depend more on virtual interactions and online transactions post-pandemic, and depending more on digital customer interactions, which is increasing day by day. A big example is e-tail instead of retail, which is a growing industry every day, and we can see it growing and growing more. Now, technology platforms, including connectivity, are a major pillar in that transformation. Analytics, voice and text descriptive analytics, and predictive analytics are on the rise. Now, we have to mention that cloud-based solutions, rather than on-premises, heavy assets and heavy support systems, are the way to go now, and that will ease the operation not only from our side, but also from the customer interaction side. It's easier for the clients to access cloud-based systems. It's more robust systems, and we can see dependency more and more on digital platforms, and especially cloud-based systems as we go. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Your Excellency, Dr. Ahmed.
Thank you very much, and I'm honored to be among the panelists here, and thanks everybody for listening. Well, when we thought about the pandemic and what happened, and in education sector, as I'm leading the ICT in the education sector, and how to use technology in this sector, business process and deliverables that being before the COVID were dependent on the human factor, where the transformation begins about how to enhance the teachers, the administration, and the administrative principles. So it's all concerned about training, doing such type of enhancements. But 3 years ago, when Egypt started the transformation in the education, we think about the technology. So technology is like an important factor of how to employ technology in the right way of achieving the business goals that we put 3 years ago. Pandemic, COVID, what happened, it was like a shared experience among all the worlds. Different experience evolved in different countries of how to tackle this and how to deliver the business. At that time, when we started 3 years ago of putting the strategy of how to use technology in education, it was a challenge that how we continue among the resistance that normally evolved from people and the community of adopting to the new transformation methods of how to use technology in the education process itself, like e-learning content and how to use devices, introducing devices into the classrooms. But when it happened to have that this crisis that happened and we stopped all aspect of life, in Egypt we survived of just moving smooth and flawlessly using this technology, and we learned a lot of lessons regarding that building the business process. It's important to be flexible, agile, and resilient, and how to use the technology in the right resilient way of achieving the business process. I think this is for among the panel. We will discuss more about what happens and what we use and what methods and lessons learned from that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hatem.
It's real absolute pleasure to be amongst this great panel and to address the great audience that I would love to actually even to have more interaction with, to learn from. When I'm hearing these great words about digital transformation and user-centric design and how this is actually changing the way we live and interact with each other, I cannot think more of these articles that came in 1980s in Harvard Business Review called "Does It Matter?" or "Does IT Matter?" This is one of the famous articles that shaped the IT industry when actually people debated whether we are driven in innovation by the technology readiness or by the user needs. And I believe this debate is still there. And we are, it's a position that we are taking in Sohab, for example, and we learned over time that what we are selling is really convenience. And imagine this very call that we have at the moment that happens from 4 countries, if I understand it right. So we are sitting in 4 different countries. We are speaking to audience maybe in another 50 countries or so. And imagine how on earth we could have done that in any other fashion. Of course, we don't think about the underlying enablement that made this possible, from connectivity, from the use of voice devices, the use of visual devices in different fashions. I mean, this is just huge, and people are taking it for granted now that this is the norm. This is a new norm, that this will happen. And not only that, this creates and opens the door for new opportunities that will go further and further. And I believe we need to focus on one important angle that I'm taking here is the social impact and for this user-centered design. So making sure now, for example, productivity is going in multiples when we work from home. Is this good? Maybe at the beginning for the companies, for making the benefit out of it. But look at the people who are being so productive to the level that they lost some of the social aspects and how they want to come back to their own lives. Same applies to schools, whether it will be virtual, hybrid, fully physical again, what will happen in that? All these social aspects for user-centered design is a driver for a lot of innovations that we're making in Soho, making sure that people are really benefiting from digital transformation in a convenient way.
Thank you, sir. And now finally, Mr. Amar.
Thank you very much. And it becomes challenging to speak after all those great minds actually made the remarks. But I will speak from the point of view of my own personal experience as a father first, as a human being, and as a founder and leader of an organization that respects and looks at the technology as the way forward for all digital inclusions. I will talk about few words that keeps soundbiting, which is a humbling experience. What happened was a humbling experience. Is it business to business? Is it business to consumer? Or is it human to human now? Are we the most clever species into adaptation because we know how to adapt as humans? And I talk about the digital inclusion. I will take them one by one. The pandemic was a humbling experience to our human race, to understand that our illusion of controlling destiny and being able to understand most of the risks that actually threaten our own existence, we're not there yet. In fact, it seems that we're far. And we have to make sure that we can protect our human race, our assets and our interests and our loved ones by distancing them and so on. The second one is it business to business? But businesses were closed. Everybody was working from home. And now we hear work from home, party from home, and now we hear banking from home. I get all those emails day and night about banking from home. But then I go, where is home? Is home your physical place, or now we have a digital identity that lives and thrives for a different sphere that's called actually the digital inclusion. And I go to the last one, which is adaptability. And I go to His Excellency, Dr. Ahmed, about how the students, and I go to Ahmed Rifki, my colleague and partner in business even, where the contact center agents who were struggling to reach their offices finally found a new way to work, which is working from home. Technologies like background noise cancelling, technologies like voice and data over the cloud allowed them to earn their living and be able to serve other humans, maybe on the other side of the world, from their homes. So if I look at all those things, they would not be available unless you have a digital inclusion system that would present a sphere for education, a sphere for contact center, for example, a sphere for banking, and we have our own copy of our digital identity on the cloud. If I go and wrap this all into what is our biggest challenge in Middle East and Africa around it, is how to reach the internet. And this is where we incepted OmniCloud to liberate the access and consumerize the access to cloud, whether it's public cloud or local cloud, and make it available with current available technologies for all humans in this part of the world to be able to reach the cloud for a sometimes $1 sign. And that makes them able to reach this wealth of knowledge and wealth of services. And this will not go away, because every human acute experience, like the pandemic, or sometimes even good experiences, changes the way humans behave. And maybe all of us came at the nick of time, at a moment that this was all just ready to happen. All the stars were aligned. And thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And I think to your point, let me lead off with the question specifically about the theme of the accessibility that you just mentioned a moment ago, and actually jump back to Mr. Ba, because you led with the idea of accessibility and connectivity, especially in, accessibility in Africa is, in emerging markets in general, has been something that, people have been working on long before COVID. But of course, the need to access during a pandemic like COVID has been exaggerated significantly. Dr. Ahmed, I'll come to you next to talk about, student access, because that had a huge impact on learner continuity. But Mr. Ba, if I could throw this back to you and talk a little bit about the idea of accessibility and how has that evolved, changed, or what has been the focus in the last year?
Thank you, Solveig. It's a very relevant question. And when we address accessibility, I think we have to look at, first of all, as an example, the African context, and to a larger extent, let's call it the developing nations, because we have the same in Africa, in Latin America, in many countries in Asia. If you take the African subcontinent, for Africa, there are factors that limit the capacity of digitization to improve social and economic resilience. And the term is extremely important, especially in the current times. These include the digital divide, where it still persists, and demand side barrier, the soft factor, such as limited accessibility, affordability, and also there is a reality that we need to look at, the digital illiteracy. Bringing that into the discussion of today, the use of digital technology during the crisis in Africa. We will be surprised because Africa has been globally very resilient. While digital transformation has also accelerated in part of Africa region as a result of the crisis, it has highlighted the urgent need for universal digital access to ensure that people can be rich, people can stay informed, and people are able to work and communicate. Now, what government have done, African government, they declare telecom services as essential service. And for the record, there is an interesting study made by the European Investment Bank that has examined digital solutions that have since been implemented across the African region and those that can help Africa in managing the current and future crisis. There are many examples on how technology played a part in Africa, and I will just, for our conversation, list some of them. It includes collaborative tools such as, for example, contact tracing application. And one of the best examples is in Kenya, it's called M-Safari. I can list also large communication tools, health-related tools such as self-assessment application, and it has been deployed in 15 African countries. Self-assessment solution based on USSD technology, for example, in Sierra Leone, where government platform in partnership with local startup to enable citizens to conduct a self-assessment of their symptom for the COVID. You have the example of drones and robots that has been deployed in Ghana, for example, and that was for collect the test samples from the health facility in rural and remote area and deliver them to medical laboratories in the countries. A number of healthcare software, e-commerce purchase and delivery platform organized by a UN agency called the UNDP in partnership with in Uganda. In the field of education, because we have His Excellency here, in education technology, for example, they have deployed some learning platform in Tanzania. I can list many of them and I can go on and on. Government monitoring dashboard and solution that target the protection of vulnerable population. So what I want to say, and someone was mentioning about the digital inclusion, Africa is well known as a leader in digital payment, and the pandemic has had an important impact on the necessity and growth of digital platforms. As an example, we can list, for example, Kenya again or Togo. But basically, and generally speaking, the health sector is one of the sectors that has witnessed rapid and innovative action by African government during the pandemic. Objective to control the spread of the COVID-19. And it's interesting to learn that more than 120 technology-based solutions were tested or adopted in the region, which represent 13% of the innovation design worldwide. Most of the digital innovation were information and communication technology, WhatsApp chatbots, self-diagnostic tools, contact tracing, mobile health information. So in one way, or the takeaway is that these examples shows that new technologies are able to create new jobs and boost the productivity of existing technologies currently in Africa. I hope it answered the question. Back to you.
Very well, sir. And like you said, I think that one subject could be an hour-long discussion. But to that point, you referenced educational technologies, and of course, Dr. Ahmed, I don't think there was anyone in the world who doesn't have children or students or learners in their lives for whom remote learning became a very, very big issue. And so I'm curious how, related to issues of accessibility, which is where we started this dialogue, but then other technologies that you employed to make sure that the learning continued in Egypt throughout this.
Yes, well, to know that, let's talk about numbers. Egypt have like 24 million students from K to 12, and 1.6 million teachers, with 55,000 schools distributed geographically all over Egypt in different distance area. So it was like, and we have some challenges and obstacles that already been evolved during the last 50 years. we're trying to solve in the past 3 years or 4 years, when we started the renovation and revamping of the system, of developing a new curriculum, a new framework, and to do the transformation. And well, we know, all of us know, that transformation is concerned about people, process, technology, and best practice. So the technology part, it's for us, it's like the easiest part. And why it's easy? Because of the availability of the partners and the ecosystem that are doing the innovation all the time. So it was important for us just to decide the process itself, and we did that of just trying to cope with the 21st century skills and bringing up students that are capable of entering the global market, empowered with digital skills and skills that have the jobs of the future for the future. So we have you know that Egypt is 100 million in population, and it's like a young company, where a young country, where we have like 50 or 60% youth, and 24 a third of that in the education system. So it was we have a challenge in the learning space and the quality of education in some certain areas. So when we thought about solving this in the traditional ways, in the ordinary business processes of tackling education, in enhancing quality, doing training, and trying to put some supportive material in the classroom, it won't bring to all the students in a fair distribution. So we think about putting the technology in the right context, how to use technology in order just to democratize this development and this approach. So the first thing is we divided the stages into the early childhood and the high school part, like the latest grades, grade 10, 11, and 12, the exit from the basic education system, and the entry for the basic education system. So we renovated the curriculum in the early childhood, like grade K to 4, and we introduced new curriculum, and we put like we exerted a lot of effort in doing digital objects, utilizing the e-learning platforms to have like a major learning platform, and which is called the Egyptian Knowledge Bank, where it's like a repository of all the digital content that we have, and from different providers, 90 plus providers, Britannica, Oxford, Pearson, Discovery Education, and Cengage, JU, a lot of vendors that are putting for all this digital content for free for the Egyptian citizens. You have your ID, then national ID, then you can access this digital environment. This digital environment is like the main hub. It started 2016, and we are capitalizing on this project a lot, of availing this type of content for that. And for the accessibility, as Mr. Bokar said, Egypt is like a promising country of having an outlook of enhancing the connectivity. We have fiber to home right now initiatives. We have all the stuff of technology that are trying to innovation in the connectivity part. So we are capitalizing on that, of trying to have a connected classroom concept. So what we do is trying to have a 2,500 school being connected with fiber connection to the schools, with a Wi-Fi access to every classroom in the government sector part, in urban, in distance area. And we supplied in order for the student, in order to go access this content and access the platform that we avail. So we need to avail devices for them. So we chose a good device for them, and we distributed like 1.8 million tablet device for all the graders from grade 10 to 12 students. And we supplied this with a SIM card in order to have an access when they are at home, but when they are at school, they have an access right away. We equipped the classroom with an active panel this active panel is like a computer-based screen where we are able to broadcast centrally all the content in order just to enhance the quality of the teacher itself and monitor what's happening in the classroom in terms of the teaching methodology and the process in order to bring the teacher to the standards. And then using the tablets at the time starting 2019 till now, we have like electronic exams based on the tablet itself. And we succeeded just doing 47 million exam along the last 2 years. Such type of platforms where a social learning platform like a Facebook for education, with partners, we just introduced a Netflix for education. And surprisingly, we have like a 50% access rate for the 24 million students. And right now,
sir,
I'm
only jumping in because everything
sure.
you're saying is fascinating, but I want to make sure we also, we need the industry perspective as well. So if I could ask you to hold just that thought for a moment, I'll come back to you in just a moment. Thank you so much. Okay. And now to that point, actually, Mr. Amar, I wanted to jump to you because we've talked a lot about massive and sudden shift. And, especially on a scale the size of countries, Egypt is a very large country and the education needs are huge. From the industry perspective, as an organization that provides technology, that provides solutions, how do you make them more accessible, make them more affordable, and in this context, on demand, literally immediately overnight?
I will use the word that His Excellency Dr. Ahmed mentioned, which is the democratization of access to technology. The challenge that OmniClouds was incepted to solve is the access to all this wealth of information and cloud in an affordable and practical manner to the government and to the user. We can't ask the government struggling after the pandemics and others to spend millions and millions of dollars in fiber optic networks and dedicated networks and so on and so forth. But we can definitely innovate by using the current infrastructure of copper, of SIM cards, and use our own proprietary intellectual property technologies to make sure we can avail it to students for a single $1 a month. And that's what we have done. We have managed to help countries in Egypt, in Djibouti, in the Gulf even, and now, as you can see, we're at Khartoum. We're trying to do the same thing, democratize access to knowledge and contents for everyone. And that's where the word human to human means. With a little small device or a software in your tablet, you can have access to an overlay network. We believe that changing the current infrastructure is going to cost a humongous amount of money and investment and time. And the technology and the current changes and dynamics of the world does not allow for all this. We have to use what we have. We have to realize the fact that we're living in a shared economy. We have to look at the current resources, the towers that we have, the copper that we have, the computers that we have, and use it to provide a new way of technology. That new world is called the digital service providers. It's not anymore a telco operator. We coexist with the current telecommunication network. We managed to build an overlay layer on top of it. We managed to prove to governments that data is inside the country or outside the country completely as they want. And that's what we have done. This is what we have done in education. What we have helped also the contact center services is we actually generated more jobs, because now the contact centers owners and operators don't need to worry about real estate and electricity and power and driving them back home 5 o'clock in the morning after having the graveyard shift, as they call it, by actually providing them a simple way to be able to access the multimedia contact center application in the cloud while they are working from home, while having a background noise cancelling, so they are actually virtually in the office. That is what we have managed to help the contact center services industry, the education industry. We're helping large food chains and large burger chains, I'm not allowed to mention the name, to process the ordering while they're working from home. In some of the countries in the Gulf, the ordering system used to take 48 minutes during the pandemic. I mean, if you are going to wait for 48 minutes to get a confirmation of your order, you might as well eat something else. We've managed to reduce that to 10 minutes by using just conventional and normal technologies, because those retail and food chains did not have telecom company employees to drive their car, go to them to fix the network. And we managed to do it. So this is how we've managed to touch. And now we're approaching more with the collaboration that we have with Egypt and other countries to take those know-how and technologies they have and bring it to other countries. You have a lot of teachers. Now with the virtual classes, those teachers could be teaching in some other country. We are right now in 5 countries, I think we are, as we speak. So teachers can do the same thing. But hey, what? Doctors can do the same thing also. All what it needs is a screen and a high definition camera and a good link to the cloud, and you can have remote clinical visits. We've just changed the world. So I hope that explains it. Thank you.
It does. And it makes me think, you were just mentioning the different industries that you touch, and you specifically mentioned the call center. So Mr. Ahmed, I'm going to jump to you a little bit about some of the changes that Mr. Amr mentioned. And you in your introduction talked about the evolution of expectations of the consumer and of the industry itself. And I'm wondering how you have seen those expectations change. How durable do you think those changes are, and other insights in that area?
Sure. Let me talk about one of the biggest challenges that we faced during the pandemic, which is, as I said, all of a sudden everything is locked down, and that was the biggest surprise that we faced when everything was locked down all of a sudden, and we had to move everyone home. And as Amr mentioned, the biggest challenge was whether the infrastructure would be resilient enough to cope with a huge number of people that are working from home. And here I'm talking about infrastructure at home. I mean, the accessibility at home, because businesses are usually robust enough and resilient enough to cope with any changes, and they have backups and so on. But usually the main challenge was, will the connectivity at home will be resilient enough? And surprisingly, it was great. We depended on public infrastructure, and we depended also on innovative, ideas and technologies like OmniClouds, which helped us a lot during the pandemic. Now, there's also a dimension here that I would comment on Amr saying that creating job opportunities. The interesting dimension here that we actually started during the pandemic, and we're continuing to do, is work from home as a CSR program. Because when you look at our region, there are some people and housewives that are not interested to go for a 9-to-5 job. They're not interested to commute to their job locations every day. And there are challenged people that cannot really go to the job site. And this has created a huge opportunity for people who are not interested, or who cannot do a 9-to-5 job, or who cannot do a commute every day to the job. And now we have a big base of people who are actually choosing the number of hours that they can work per day or per week, and created for us a huge opportunity for those kind of workers, So I think it was a very successful model. Yes, we were forced to do it all of a sudden, but as I said before, it worked well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And actually, Mr. Hatem, it makes me think of, I know one of the major components of the work you have done is in the area of gaming. And honestly, we've talked about accessibility, but the conversation has evolved a little bit to the idea of speed. And of course, gaming latency issues are a huge impact in the gaming industry, but I'm wondering, broader than that, obviously that's something that I'm sure saw a huge demand spike when everyone was at home all of a sudden. I do remember all of a sudden that governments were asking Netflix to slow down their streaming speeds because it was slowing down the internet. I'm willing to bet gaming had hugely contributed to that as well. But issues, Mr. Ahmed just mentioned, and Mr. Amr just mentioned ideas of medical, being able to diagnose and do medical remotely, and doing teaching remotely, and gaming, of course, remotely. All of these are speed-dependent issues, accessibility and speed-dependent issues. But I'm wondering, just from from your perspective in the industry, how has that changed, has evolved, and what, if any, of the learnings that you have you been able to apply outside of your core business model?
Sure. So let's start by shedding some light on this actually jump in the usage of gaming during the pandemic time. And in a recent study by Deloitte, actually, it showed a 39% increase in the payment in gaming industry. And half of that actually came from new users who didn't pay at all before that. What's really interesting in looking at these numbers is that the gaming that happened to be a network-based gaming increased even with more percentages, and the individualistic games actually went down. They were not used enough. And this showed another social aspect that what really people looked for was actually a way to connect with friends and families through the gaming experience. So the need to connect is very important to consider when you think of why people actually increase their usage of gaming. So this is, of course, an important aspect, and of course, it played for our interest in Sohab and OmniClouds when we looked at availing the solutions to help with the gaming industry. This is one aspect. Another aspect, what we are solving for in the gaming industry are two elements in specific. One is the consistency of bandwidth. So even if you have high speeds promised by ISPs, still what's really important for gamers is the consistency of this provide speeds over time. Because the average person who will play PUBG, for example, will stay for 2 hours playing PUBG. And during this period, it's not acceptable that he or she loses, because people's main motivation to play games is to win. And not having consistency can be a real issue. Another important thing, of course, is the latency, and especially in the Middle East and Africa. And the main reason for that, the servers for most of the famous games are residing in Europe, US, Australia, or Far Asia. So very little game providers who actually came to the region with their servers. So even if you have good connectivity in a country, still, like in Gulf, for example, you still will face the problem with latency. And just to give you some numbers, playing Fortnite, for example, a latency of 125 milliseconds will be experienced in Gulf, while in Europe, it will be around 30 to 40. And to have a good experience playing these games, you need something around 70 to 80 at most. And bringing these numbers down is very important. So looking at all these problems and their solutions and how this actually affects the experience, the end user experience in the gaming context, of course, you can apply it to other contexts. I will just put an example here. Any mixed reality solution that can be used can, of course, make a lot of use for what we solved for in the gaming industry. This mixed reality can be a learning thing. People, when we speak about education and learning, we tend to think K-12, the normal schooling, but we put little emphasis on the vocational learning, for example. And vocational learning was affected as equal by, and of course, His Excellency Dr. Ahmed will shed more light because he understands the reality much more than me. But I mean, this is a real thing, a real big thing that can benefit from a mixed reality solution. Of course, health tech in general and telemedicine can be a huge benefiter of this resolutions that we came to. Entertainment and edutainment is another big thing. And Amr mentioned in one of his introductory points, partying from home. And this is huge now. Imagine all the birthdays our kids had in the past 2 years. And actually, we all experienced that. So having a karaoke night with a family over the internet, latency will play a role. I've seen a problem for musicians who are coming from different countries as an orchestra trying to sing together. And latency is the same problem as it is for gaming. So again, many other fields to apply the solutions we came up with for gaming in other industries that we are starting to see good traction for it, and we are working on that.
Thank you very much, sir. I am conscious of the time, and I want to give everyone sort of a momentary last word. So if I could ask you to combine just your thoughts, either what is the biggest surprise or the biggest opportunity that you feel is coming out of COVID in your particular sphere, and any last thoughts in just, about a minute each, if you could just give me your last thoughts on this subject. I know it is something we could all debate endlessly, but for the purposes of this webinar, I want to just close there. So let me jump back to Mr. Bakar. I'll start there again.
Well, there is a lot that we could say, but very quickly, I think it's important to understand what are the impediments and what are the key accelerators in the developing nations. Number one, I think digital infrastructure should be considered as an infrastructure to support the development. None of what we are talking about can happen if there is no digital infrastructure. So connecting the unconnected, that's number one. To be able to do that, we need to have the right enabling framework, including the creation of sector regulation, healthy competition, and very strong private sector investment. The quality of competition matters, and the scale is important. If we come back to Africa, it's a continent where use is extremely important, and we have the scale. So I would say, as a conclusion, digital transformation could be a game changer for the African continent and can help turn Africa into a global powerhouse for the reason that I have mentioned: young population, local innovation, great leapfrogging potential. It's an opportunity to boost economic growth and industrialization, alleviate poverty, and improve people's life. The use of digital technology and services can also help contribute to achieving the African Union agenda, which is 2063. So overall, Africa has made great strides and is the continent with the biggest growth potential, a continent with one of the highest youth population, which, when government invest well or lead the investment behavior, it can lead to significant demographic dividends. And digital technology can play a great role in this process, in particular as regard to supporting the creation of employment. And I will stop there because I know that we have a time constraint. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Ahmed.
Yes, I would see a huge opportunity for born tech companies. I mean, born tech companies have been, on the rise for the past, period of time. We've seen it mostly in financial services, e-payments, and so on. But we're seeing more and more companies and industries are depending on more on born tech technology. Companies who are actually born tech, and we're seeing more and more dependency on those companies. We're seeing more and more rise of the presence and startups of those companies in different industries. And I think this is a huge opportunity. But when we talk born digital and born tech, we have to really depend, since there is no physical interaction, then we have really to depend on the support behind those companies and those technology. And of course, the cloud-based solutions and connectivity. Those are the key success for those companies. But we will see more and more in different industries. We will see a huge leap in those startups.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Ahmed.
Well, we should learn from that the risks that covered us from the COVID, that our business process should be agile and resilient, and not to stick with the old pattern of developing of processes. And I do agree with Mr. Ahmed and Mr. Bukhar of just trying to utilize the innovation, the connectivity, and the tech that we have, and give them the space of just trying to put them in a new mainstream that we have in the ordinary business. Not to stick with the old traditional way of thinking, of sticking to policies. Policies should be dynamic, should be resilient, and things like that. We learned from COVID that we never thought about doing things. And we're just trying to call it the new normal. So I think that it will be coming again, and it will become to a certain, it's like a market risks that are happening all the time. But this risk was a big risk, was with an impacting risk. So we should be prepared of trying more solutions, more innovation, not stick with the policy that we have and the business processes that we have. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you so much, sir. And finally, Mr. Hatem.
Yeah, so actually, while we are speaking in essence about digital transformation at large, I believe the word transformation needs more attention. And I believe the speed of transformation that was accelerated by the pandemic is defining the new norm. So people acceptance for change and its speed is much higher, and resistance is going lower and lower. And this can be an opportunity, big opportunity, to really solve for a lot of the important questions we had. And I believe we need to focus on the questions we need to solve for, and this will drive the right transformation.
Well, thank you all so very much. I know we could discuss this for a very long time. Unfortunately, we have to wrap it up for today, but I think it set a very good foundation for future debate. And I would like to take this opportunity to once again thank our panelists, His Excellency, Dr. Ahmed Daher, Deputy Minister for Information Technology, the Ministry of Education in Egypt, Mr. Ahmed Refki, CEO of Raya Contact Center, Mr. Bokhar Ba, CEO of the Samina Council, Mr. Hatem Salam, CEO of Sohab, and Mr. Amr Eid, CEO and board member of OmniClouds. I would also like to thank our sponsor, OmniClouds, and on behalf of HBR Arabia, MIT Technology Review Arabia, and the entire Majara team, this is Solveig Nicholas, thanking you for listening, and look forward to our next event.
Thank you all.
Thank you all so very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Go.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.